Happening now. We'd like to welcome our viewers from across North America and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room, episode 297 for June the 7th, 2023. My name is Wes Fryer, coming to you from Matthews, North Carolina, where I am on summer break and have actually been backpacking in the Blue Ridge Mountains for the last 3 days. And so I appreciate Dr. Neiffer doing the heavy lifting with our links tonight. But joining me as always, the EdTech guru of the North, thankfully apparently not overwhelmed with smoke from Canadian fires, it's Dr. Jason Neiffer.
Good evening, Dr. Fryer. How are you tonight?
Oh, I'm good. I'm glad to be here, and I think we're going to have some travel coming up here in a couple of weeks. So I'm glad for us to be able to get the show in tonight, because I think we might have some postponements or some just June may not be four shows. So
yeah, definitely, but that's quite all right, and happy to get with you tonight. And lots of, you mentioned we don't have smoke here, and I know a lot of the country does right now, and I have been noticing some of my Western U.S. friends that have had to put up with this for weeks and sometimes months each summer the last couple of years kind of say, well, welcome to our existence, rest of the country, as we tend to get a lot of wildfire smoke. And I've seen some really extraordinary pictures of people, selfies in New York City today, suggesting that it's thick as pea soup there in Manhattan, which of course is really quite extraordinary. But we wish everyone well there. And more importantly, if you are a medically sensitive group, of which I qualify for that, stay inside. And as much as you probably don't want to hear this, it's probably not a terrible idea to wear an N95 if you are going to go out in this thick pea soup smoke that seems to be dominating the area out there.
definitely.
But I don't think this is the smoke report, Dr. Fryer. What are we doing tonight?
Well, we're here to. I'm here to learn about Apple. I think I was in the woods on Monday, but we're going to talk about the latest tech headlines and shoot them through the educational prism. We've got articles you can find on edtechsr.com/links about artificial intelligence, social media, and the new Apple stuff. And we've got some geeks of the week as well. So I don't know. Do you want to start with Apple, or do you want to go somewhere else, since we may talk a lot of Apple? Let's
start with Apple. In part because the most of the news this week is AI, and again, I'm getting a little tired of talking about AI. In part because I feel like that there's just a lot of hand wringing there, and some of it's justified, and some of it's definitely not. But actually, no, I'll just talk about that when we get to AI. So on Monday there was an Apple event, and I didn't catch much of it live because I was working during that time, and actually forgot about it. I had planned on maybe watching part of it live, but lots of new interesting things. And I guess I'll start with the less interesting things first. There is a new 15-inch MacBook Air, which is the first time that they've moved the kind of ultra thin MacBook Air design into the ultra thin MacBook Air design into the 15-inch laptop category. And by all accounts, it looks like a really spectacular laptop. A massive size screen, very bright, extraordinary pixel density, 500 nits of brightness. It's a 15.3-inch, as they call liquid retina screen, and it's about twice the resolution and 50 or 25% brighter than the comparative PC laptop, although sometimes Apple's comparisons there are not necessarily fair, but still, obviously an incredible laptop. I do like that it kind of adopts the MacBook Air M2 design, so it's less of a wedge now and more of just a flat laptop design with some interesting looking feet on the bottom. It does come with 2 USB Type-C ports that are actually Thunderbolt ports, a MagSafe power, and a headphone jack. It can also power an external 6K display, and then of course the headphone jack, like I mentioned earlier. And it has the M2 chip in it, and I've actually played a little bit around with M2 chips there just for a couple minutes on someone else's laptop. Very snappy, very responsive, does extremely well in all the benchmarks that I would usually run on a laptop to get a sense of how it's processing information. And it looks like it's pretty extraordinary of a device. And for me, the biggest interest here is that this is going to be a relatively inexpensive laptop. It starts at $1,200, $1,199 for education customers, and $1,299 for regular customers. I think they mention education here so prominently in part because I would imagine that that's part of who their customer base is here. That education customers, and I would imagine you could easily get 4, 5, 6 years reliably out of the $1,200 MacBook Air with the 15-inch screen. So really an interesting development here, and it adds another element to this class. And one thing I've noticed, I now personally own a MacBook Air M1 that I was able to get pretty cheaply in 2022. And it's the base model with just the 8 gigs of RAM and relatively small hard drive. And I have to say that it has been an extraordinary trooper. And I think that if you're in the market for a laptop and you would like a little bit of a larger one, I do miss having a larger screen when I am on my 13-inch MacBook Air. I think this M2 MacBook Air 15 is an extraordinary bargain at this price and is probably a good pickup. So anything tempting about this particular product for you, Dr. Fryer?
Boy, it sure is, from the standpoint of wanting a machine that I have an admin password on. My wife, we picked up an M1 when we were departing Oklahoma. It has been a fantastic computer for her. The other thing that occurs to me is every time Apple releases new hardware, the used market is affected. And so, used M1s, used M2s are gonna go down in price. So that's good news. And we did update our youngest daughter's laptop. She's gonna get a Windows machine when she goes to the Air Force Academy, but she's used a Mac kind of her whole life. And so went on to Swappa and got like a 2019, I think maybe MacBook Air, whatever, picked it up for like $500. So it's faster than the one that she had before. She had a lot of hand-me-downs. So I don't know exactly when I'll be in the market for one, but like I said, if not one of these new ones, the fact that the used ones are going to be affected by the release is also good news. So
yeah, absolutely. So then the next thing released is their new kind of high-end models, and they're releasing finally a Mac Pro, and then also an updated Mac Mac Studio, which is kind of their maxed out I guess Mac Mini would be the way to describe it, and it's kind of intended for the prosumer / kind of creator audience. And I've been reading a lot of stories on this the last couple of days, and one of the reasons why the Mac Pro was such a popular machine back in the day is that it was a machine that allowed you to upgrade it. So I bought a Mac Pro in 2008. I used it as a daily driver through 2017, I think it was, that I had used my Mac Pro. And so that's 9 years, and I had upgraded the RAM in it. I had put new hard drives in it. In fact, I switched from spinning hard drives to SSDs a couple years in, which added quite a bit of speed. I put a new video card in it. The power supply died. I put a new power supply in it. I kept upgrading it, so it became a more effective machine year after year after year when I used it. And for that reason, it was an extraordinary bargain for me because I was able to do a lot of cool stuff with it, even though it was at one point a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old computer. And so a lot of criticism of more recent Mac Pros, including the garbage can Mac, as it's called, and the smaller, they went from a cheese grater Mac, which was the ginormous metal box, and
G5, yeah,
and then there was a cute nickname for the smaller one that was released a couple years ago with Intel. But the criticism of those was that the trash can Mac was hardly upgradable, and it takes.
Didn't you get a trash can?
I bought a used one, yeah.
Okay,
and,
used one.
yeah, and it's super cool, and I like it, and it's a cool piece of hardware, and they're selling for a song on eBay now. It's a project box for me, but the bottom line is that for lack of a better way of putting it, it may not matter to you, but to super high-end users, being able to put, beefier stuff in there, like a lot more RAM, makes a difference. So the new Mac Pro it does have some upgradability because it has a card slots in it. So for like video cards and such, I believe there's 6 of them, including one that is considered like a legacy one that you can put a lot of older hardware into, and that's going to give some upgradability for sure. But it's still not what most people, I think, are looking for, and I think that's something that just to be aware of. So. Any thoughts about that before we jump in the studio, Dr. Fryer?
Yeah, just a very, very limited number of folks. But it's also great to see Apple continuing to invest in that Pro line. We've made that comment before in the past. So it doesn't represent, the numbers of people that the regular consumer, an iPhone using, for instance, consumer demographic does, but it's still an important demographic. And Apple for a while had been criticized for really neglecting that segment. So I'm glad to see them continuing to upgrade that market segment.
Yep. And supposedly the performance in these new Mac Pros is absolutely and utterly ridiculous. And so, it's the new. It would be the new M2. I think it's an Ultra chip that the Mac Pro has, and it's got a ridiculous number of cores in it, like 60 or something like that. And so, that certainly is something interesting. That if that's something of interest to you as a pro user, or if you happen to be some variety of kind of a prosumer. And to be honest, I would kind of count myself in that category. But the other thing I would also say is that we're talking about a pretty extraordinary price here for this. And I was just going to know, I was looking at specs here, that there's a 24-core CPU in the new Mac Pro. You can have up to 76 graphic cores, which is just breaking the point, right?
Wow.
You can play back up to 22 8K ProRes video streams at a time, and you can get up to 192 gigabytes of unified memory with 8 displays. So that's really pretty extraordinary, and of course their comparisons are always mocked by people, but it's 8 times faster than the Mac Pro with an 8-core Intel W processor, and then it is 2.5 or 2.7 times faster with Octane than the 28-core Intel W Mac Pro. So it's a beefy machine. And that all said, right, like the cool thing about Apple Silicon, in my experience, is that it's pretty fast on its own. And I did experience my first lag the other day, and it was I was on this machine, which is again the base model Mac Air M1, 8 gigabytes of RAM. And I experienced my first real slowdown, and that was related to being in Google Docs. And I had a very complicated doc I was working on. It had a lot of tables and hyperlinks in it. And I would start to scroll down the page, and it would start to jitter, the mouse started to jitter a little bit. And so I restarted the machine. I also noticed that sometimes it was easier when I had refresh the page. It would go for another minute or two before it slowed down. And then I realized that my battery setting was set to low battery mode all the time. So I turned it off, got back into the dock, and it was speedy again, right? And I was wondering why. I'd been working for like 3 hours, like nonstop on Monday morning, and the battery had used like 3%, right? Ridiculously low amount of sipping on the battery. And then I realized, well, I told it to slow down, right? Because I wanted better battery life. And so I turned the battery saver off, and then everything popped back to normal.
Yeah.
So,
interesting.
that said, if you're editing video, or if you're using one of the high-end commercial video editors, yes, you do need that. do need to do that. But when I'm in, I'm just trying to think. I edit video in Camtasia Studio, for example, right? It's not a low a resource user by any stretch of the imagination, but it's certainly not doing what the high-end video resolution pieces do, but it never stutters, even on this base consumer hardware. So for whatever that's worth.
Okay. All right. Well, what about this this headset?
Okay. Well, they did a one more thing at the unveil, and of course everyone is just ecstatic beyond belief, because and I think everyone had kind of been waiting for Tim Cook to do a one more thing, right? And I guess for those of you that are old school Apple fans, that what Steve Jobs used to do, and a couple of the big categories of things that he released over time that were just surprises that he managed to keep secrets. He would do the regular stuff and then say, "Oh, and by the way, there's one more thing," and introduce something amazing. And so Tim Cook did that, and they introduced the Vision Pro, which is I don't even know how to describe the category other than it appears to be some kind of augmented reality headset.
It's a new category.
Yeah, and they're calling it a spatial computer is the term they're using, and it's pretty wild. It's a full headset that looks like a pair of ski goggles. I will also say, and I thought I'd get more traction on Twitter for noticing this, but if anyone remembers the early 80s miniseries called V, which stood for Visitors, it was about aliens invading the planet.
Oh, yeah.
And it looks just like the glasses that the aliens were wearing so that the sun wouldn't burn their eyes. Then we also would notice that they were reptilian underneath. It looks just like them, but there's these big glasses, and I've watched the video a couple of times now, and it's pretty wild because it is a new category in that it's both virtual reality and augmented reality, because you can see through the headset, and it gets lighter or darker, or lets more or less light in based on if there's something to see or if you want to see it. It doesn't have any controller, right? It tracks your eye movements, and then using your fingers, you can grab and pull and touch things inside the reality. And that's just, freaking mind blowing to me, right? And then it's basically a computer, so you can do computing tasks on it. It has an operating system on it. It looks like it runs programs. They've already worked with apparently hundreds of app developers to make sure that you can, if you want to watch Hulu, or if you want to play a game, or if you want to watch a movie or a television show or get on conferencing, that's able to handle that too. And then this one, I just don't even know where to start with this one. They were talking about how they wanted an immersive workspace, but what if you're video conferencing, right? Like they don't want to put an external camera on the actual device, and they're like, but at the same time, remember, this is on your face, so that no one wants to see you with your space goggles on, right? So they create an avatar of you that's apparently very accurate, and then that's what joins like a FaceTime call. And it follows your mouth movements, and as you're talking, it does that. So I'm blown away, and it's so funny because the reactions on social media were pretty funny. And we'll talk about the price in a minute, but a lot of people were like, yeah, you don't want to be Mark Zuckerberg today, because the Meta Quest headset, which it has a very cartoony images that are going on right now, that's not really what this is. It's clear, high resolution video, or I'm sorry, images, and a multi-tiered desktop environment, and tracks your head movements and your eye movements, and does all sorts of crazy, amazing things. So, Wes, you leave for the mountains, and look what gets released.
This has been long awaited, and the article that you found, for some reason, that archive link didn't work for me, but I found the same article from Bloomberg on Yahoo Finance that's open. So I dropped that one in. Based on past track records, I think the one to buy is going to be version 2, not this version 1, because they're going to make a lot of good improvements to it. I think the fact that Apple has gone to school on a lot of other platforms and has been late to the game is going to, as it has in the past, really play to their advantage. I have played a little bit with the not the MetaQuest Pro, but an earlier version of that. The first one, I'm trying to remember the name of it, that was fully, you didn't have to have a PC, right?
Yeah.
And so we have a couple teachers at our middle school in Oklahoma City that were into that, and it was kind of gimmicky. There was, what was it called? There was a saber fight, whatever. But like the immersive nature of being in that, and this idea of, just, I mean, it's the Ready Player One vision. It's the Ready Player One, I think, is the reason why Mark Zuckerberg, I don't think we have an article about this, but did you see how much his net worth increased in the past year? Like, it doubled again. He put him back in the top 10. Like, we'll have to find that article maybe and drop it in. But Facebook is just we should say Meta is an absolute money machine. But that's not because of his bets in VR and the fact that he changed the name of the company. I think that this will be a game changer. I really, Apple has proven again and again, whether it's, we're taking the floppy drive out of the computer now and you just have a CD-ROM, or, what other kinds of, we're dumping the USB-A port and we're going USB-C or whatever. They are ahead of the game, but I don't think they make bad bets when it comes to these kinds of technologies. The only thing I think was silly that Apple's pretty much ever made was the Generation 1 Apple Pencil. If you've ever tried to stick that in your iPad, you're like, someone from Apple actually designed this? This is crazy. But everything else, seriously, has been so solid, especially when it comes to the platform. So they, going to different educational events and I went up to the, it's called NC Ties conference in Raleigh. It's our North Carolina State EdTech conference, and, got to connect with Apple folks, and they've always been having these different, VR experiences, but mostly it's iPad and iPhone, but it's mainly iPad for school, but really incredible stuff. And you're like, seriously, kids can be experiencing, the muscular system and the cardiovascular system in this incredible immersive, environment. And so they've really laid groundwork for this for developers. And I think Apple's really solid with this. So this is super exciting. One of the things that I've mentioned, HoloLens is does the original article you have this chart that talks about the competitive field where it lists HT Vive, PlayStation? Does it have all
No, well, I'll need to look. I know one version Archive did.
Okay, the Yahoo Finance one does, and it lists the November 2019 HoloLens. We mentioned on the show a while back, and I had visited with someone who works as a GS employee for the U.S. Army, and then I found some articles verifying this. The Army was about to make really, really big bets with Microsoft for VR headsets that they were deploying in the field, and they were like actual systems that were integrated with your weapon so that you could literally point your gun behind you around a corner, and then be able to, shoot and take out real opponents. And they ended up canceling that sort of at the last minute. So it's going to be interesting to see where Apple's play, is with this. And I think part of the whole, it's this chicken and egg deal, right? Is there the content? Because if there's not the content and the software, then it's just going to be, a very expensive novelty item versus something that is really functional. So I think Apple has in the past demonstrated their ability to lay the groundwork very well for developers. That's what the Worldwide Developer Conference is all about. And I think better than any other software company, Apple's just done a great job catering to its developers. And I say catering, obviously they take 30% of their income from the store. So, it's a lucrative thing. But I think Apple really, really knows what they're doing with this. And I'm super excited. We have actually raised some funds at our school for some VR headsets. We had an English class be able to do a Diary of Anne Frank VR experience, and this thing isn't supposed to be out to early 2024. So I don't think we'll be getting this at school, but I'm excited to give it a try. And I think I'll probably go to an Apple store just to see if I can, either see a live demo of that, because this, at that price point, like you said, it is a computer. This isn't just like a pair of glasses that we're gonna buy. This is a full on computer. So prices will come down and things will get better. But I think it's a really, really big deal. It's not at a price point where it's going to transform education yet. But there are going to be applications certainly in healthcare, but in all other kinds of areas where the ability to wear a headset and be this augmented human because of all this dashboard of information and this mixed reality version of the world that you're going to be able to see and interact with. I think it's pretty exciting.
Well, and let's have a couple back and forth about the price here. And I do want to point out that there is this great video that's been posted to Twitter from the audience there today, and hopefully this audio will come over. But it's right after, it's the audience reaction after they announce the price. But here's that sound.
I'm not hearing it.
It was Apple Vision Pro starts at $34.99. Everyone goes, oh. And that's right? I mean, it's an expensive piece. And I would imagine that most of the first generation folks, or most people buying it first generation, are going to be super tech geeks. I did see some prominent kind of commentators on Twitter say things like that, oh, well, it's a ridiculous price, but of course I'll be buying one, right? And I think that's part of it. And Tim Cook has gone out of his way to say that the price might be high, but the value you get for that is pretty extraordinary and extreme. And I'm not sure if I buy that in or not. I obviously want to try one first, but I will tell you that based on what I saw, it is really a different thing. I don't know if this is a reality for working or not, right? That's something that will remain to be seen. And I myself, may or may not think it's a good thing. I know that it has 2 hours of battery life. And that is extremely concerning to me because that's it seems like a very small battery. Apparently it's a plug-in battery. And that the original battery is relatively small. It looks like I've seen some pictures on Twitter, and a lot of people are assuming that you can buy a larger one from Apple, that it might be able to go 4 hours or 6 hours instead. 2 hours is also interesting because that doesn't even cover you for most movies, for example. And I would imagine that there is some cachet for people that travel a lot, that want to be able to have a movie experience as a passenger in a car or in an airplane. Certainly, there's something to be said about the learning environment piece here. And I think you're right, Wes, that it's not going to be a popular device in schools quite yet because of the price. But the other reason why I won't buy a first edition of this is I was this close to buying Google Glass round one, because I really did think that at some point it was going to be, I guess for lack of a better way of putting it, the wave of the future. And I still think Google gave up too quickly on that. But what I would say is that it'll only get better in version 2 and 3, and I don't think we're gonna have to wait that long for it. It's not gonna be released until January 1st, 2024. So I would assume if there's a new version, we're talking 2025, 2026, and by then both the price would be lower, I would imagine.
One moment.
Uh-oh, Siri thinks I'm talking to her. And then the more functionality, and then things like longer battery life, because 2 hours isn't very long.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a first generation device in a new category is by definition going to be an early adopter device. It's not going to be the mass market device. So, if you are in a financial situation where you can jump at this, great. Reach out and let us know. We'd love to know when, it's going to be 2024 before you have your hands on it. But, it is what it is. But the fact that Apple has jumped in with a new product, and there's actually hardware and not just software and, APIs or, frameworks and whatever for being able to create software. It's a really big deal. So, and if you haven't experienced some of the augmented reality apps that are available for iPad and for iPhone, I mean, it's one of those things. Going to ISTE or a state level EdTech conference or something like that, and going to the app, it's really not the Apple booth. They have these sessions about different products and things, but it is mind blowing, and they just keep on getting better. And so we're iPad 1-to-1 at our school, right? And so I don't know the degree to which we are leveraging those kinds of technologies. They definitely have a big wow factor, but for courses where we're doing things like anatomy, just as an example, I mean, the ability to have this interactive textbook that allows you to separate the layers and to just visualize this, it makes a traditional textbook look like a cave drawing or some kind of an inscription on hieroglyphic stone tablets or something. So it's a big deal.
Absolutely.
All right, well, hey, I dropped a few articles in, so let's do a social media one first, because this one's pretty troubling. TechCrunch on June 3rd reported that YouTube has rolled back its rules against election misinformation. And this is both surprising and troubling. I think that we need to be going the opposite direction. And we certainly have been seeing that with Twitter, right? In terms of the number of folks that have been replatformed and the amount of harassment and persecution that has been going on. And then, the conversations about the upcoming elections in 2024 and what this means. But I just don't think this is a move in the right direction. And so YouTube announced Friday, this is an article again from the 3rd of January, that it would reverse its rules around election denialism, allowing some previously prohibited false claims effective immediately. Now, if they are claims that are going to say, oh, your polling place is over here, or oh, you vote on this day when it's not that day, those are still going to be blocked. But they are going to allow claims, for instance, that deny the valid results of an election. And so I don't know what the exact motivation for this is, other than, to, I guess, appease conservative voices that are really upset that they're not being able to say anything that they want about the election. So at the risk of handing you a political hot potato, would you like to comment on that, or do you want to move on to something else?
Well, it's the weird thing about this is the brazenness in which they're announcing it. They're literally saying, well, we're not going to stop people from pushing false claims. That seems really strange to me, right? I'm just not entirely sure that that serves any purpose, because there's nothing in this article that even says why they're doing it, right?
It doesn't. It gives no background, nothing about what motivated it. It's a response to something, or this congressman or whatever. It's just, this is their policy change.
In the current environment, we find that while removing this content does curb some misinformation, it can also have the unintended effect of curtailing political speech without meaningfully reducing the risk of violence or other real-world harm, the company wrote in a blog post. With that in mind, we will stop removing content that advances false claims that widespread fraud, errors, or glitches occurred in the 2020 and other past presidential elections. Because, I'm not sure if you knew this, Wes, but a lot of conspiracy theorists focus on that 1956 presidential election. So, I don't know. That's troublesome to me. And, maybe it's because, they were granted but they confirmed Section 230 liability limits for platforms. Maybe that was part of the process, so that for them, they feel like that there's no legal risk there. But I don't know. Do the tech companies have a larger obligation to the democracy or not? And I don't know, right? I think that's maybe a bigger topic than our lowly EdTech podcast. But yeah, absolutely.
Peggy is asking in the chat, maybe they don't want to have to fact check everything. I mean, the fact is none of these platforms have the capacity to fully fact check, or even just to fully moderate the content that's being created by users. Look at what happens with, they've done all kinds of things to try to help with this, but violent events that are live streamed and things like that end up being on, and then the videos are out there, and it's just about impossible for them to completely stop and shut down. My conjecture is that this is just going to be politically easier for them because they have faced opposition from different political corners when they have done this. And yeah, you may be right, Jason. They may be kind of just reclining back in Section 230 saying, hey, we do police content that violates our community standards and our terms of service, et cetera. But this is a platform and that people express themselves, and we're not supposed to be the police or whatever. We're not supposed to be the censors for all that. But it just seems like a weird move in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Let's see. I put this one in here under security. I think you maybe retweeted this one too. This is from Bleeping Computer. Malicious Chrome extensions with 75 million installs removed from the web store. And I have seen this, not this specific thing, but with working with different teachers for a while, I was working with this writers group and helping out with a conference and seeing all these different extensions that people liked. And I'm gonna get some points to get save a little bit of money. One of these programs was called the PDF Toolbox extension. It had 2 million downloads. It included a code that was disguised as a legitimate extension API wrapper. The code allowed and it lists the name of a domain, to inject arbitrary JavaScript into any website the user visited. And so that could not only insert ads into web pages, but steal sensitive information. These can also change what you see on the web, right? Like a certain word can be changed. There was one when the New Zealand shooter, when that happened, there was somebody that created an extension that replaced his name with something else. And it was the idea of trying to not amplify that shooter's name, as I'm not doing now by not saying his name. But like that idea of something being able to intersect in between you and the web content and actually changing it. And I'm just seeing one that I'd installed this on my phone, the Crystal ad block. That is an ad blocker that I had played with for iOS. And so they've found this suspicious code, and what they don't know is exactly how many people, if people really have their identity stolen or what the actual impact. And that's what they conclude the article with. They say, while 75 million downloads looks worrying, the company suspects the count was artificially inflated. And this all came from Avast. So this is an example of research that's being done. Thank you, security researchers. But I think the biggest takeaway is we got to be careful out here, folks. I know this is a radical claim. You've never heard Jason and I ever say this in the context of security, but with respect to our software, and even with Chrome extensions, we really do have to not only be wary when we're installing something new, but we also need to take a periodic inventory. And if you're not actively using something, just disable it. That's one of I love Extensity, I think is the name of EXTENSITY. Love it because, it just gives me the drop down and I can, enable, disable. It takes memory, if you're not using them. But anyway, I thought that was a pretty substantial article. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, you see less of this now than you did, say, 6-7 years ago. But yeah, that was a very common conference session. The 9 Google extensions that I love, or 9 ways to make yourself a power user. And to be clear, I have a set of them too that I install on almost every browser. I was just looking at my Extensity, but my password savers, 1Password, Buffer, the ColorPick eyedropper. I have no idea why Coupon Birds is in there, so I'm assuming that's got to be it's not turned on, so I imagine that's not great. as I admit to something embarrassing here on the podcast tonight.
You're not the only person trying to get coupons with a Chrome extension. I mean, there's tons of teachers and others.
But I'm wondering if that's malware actually. So
right, and this is the thing to let people know, because look, I'll get a coupon. Look, I'll get this, and this social engineering. That's why this PDF toolbox, people installed it because great, I'll get to do new things with a PDF. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's a malware injection.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that I had noted in that, and I'm not sure if I had the TechCrunch article, another one that I read said too, that they worked, right? Like these weren't ones that didn't function. They functioned exactly as I said they would, because they were legitimately Chrome extensions, right? But in this particular scenario, it had the malware in addition to the other stuff, and I think that's a part that I think is, for me, is very concerning. And it's a very important thing on Chromebooks, extensions, because that's one of the ways that you can help modify your experience. And so, very concerned about that. And, I guess I would just state what we talk about all the time. It's decently dangerous out there.
Yeah. Peggy's saying, the average user probably doesn't know enough to detect those extensions and not to jump into new things quickly. Yeah. Unfortunately, what this article shows, though, is even when there's a lot of downloads, because that's usually something, and I'll even teach that to my students. Hey, how many ratings? How many downloads? If something's got like 1 rating and 300 downloads, like that's not very much. So you probably don't want to give that a try. So I think looking at what other reliable sources that are checking security, I don't know. It's just, it's hard. And this is why IT departments in different enterprises as well as schools sometimes lock things down really hard, right? And it's to try to prevent someone from putting anything on their box, which might not only affect their information and their data, but potentially the whole network and the whole organization. Peggy's asking a question. If you've already installed one of the extensions they removed, do you just remove it? I don't think I have, but just curious. Yes. So you do remove it, but then I think you need to go ahead and restart Chrome as well to make sure everything is gone. And that should remove it. If that's not the case, I don't know. We'd have to look into the individual ones, but that's usually the case, that if you remove the extension, restart your browser, you're good to go.
Yep. Absolutely.
Good question. All right.
Anything else we need to cover in the non-AI news?
Well, I put a couple of AI ones. I guess let's just do this one real quick. Google Assistant kills off support for third-party note apps. This was Ars Technica on June 1st. I use my Google Assistant most frequently to put events on my calendar, and then I'll usually add something to my shopping list. At one point, what was it called? Don't forget the milk, or these different note-taking apps and stuff like that were a thing, and people were trying those. But this isn't a real big deal for me. But I also wonder, what is the trajectory of Google Assistant and the Google smart devices, and how's Bard and ChatGPT and these things going to affect it? So have you been a third-party note app user with your assistant, Jason?
Yeah, I have been in the past. I mean, I'm not using the Google Assistant nearly at all anymore. And in fact, one of the things that I've decided to do inside my house is that, just because of safety and security, we're going to stick with Apple devices in that realm, just because I feel like the rest of the devices are just too prone to security issues. But I mean, I do think that you're seeing a lot more of this, like locking down of these platforms. And I mean, ultimately, I think that hurts consumers. And you should, now that said, Google Keep is a really great notes app, right? So it's a good alternative. It's not like the alternative there is bad, but every time that these companies do this, it just makes it that much more difficult.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, shall we jump into the AI rabbit hole?
Yeah, we got about 15 minutes left, and I think we both added some interesting.
Oh my gosh, we do! I was thinking we had half the show.
No, we managed to talk. We've only talking about AI for almost 45 minutes. So, I want to talk about. There is a. Did I not put the art? I texted back and forth about this all day long today.
If you want me to, I'll do one while you
go ahead.
Do one while you find. And don't forget your Geek of the Week too. Okay, yes. Here's 2 quick ones that I actually got from Hard Fork, which is Kevin Roos and Casey Newton's podcast from the New York Times. Absolutely love that. I'm listening to that almost every week. This is from the Washington Post on May 18th. A professor accused his class of using ChatGPT, putting diplomas in jeopardy. Oh, shoot. Is that really going to be that long? Okay, wait a second. I guess it's trying to. I thought I was sharing a gift link for this. So the professor actually asked ChatGPT, put these essays back into ChatGPT, and then asked ChatGPT if it had written them. It said yes. And so, I figured it was a case of using, what was that, ChatGPT 0 or whatever that
Yeah, or one of the
student had
90,000
created.
tools that's now available.
And so, this is a very real issue, probably in every school that has any kind of honor code. So your schools probably had issues this spring relating to ChatGPT and students. And so, in this case where the professor doesn't have evidence and thinks they're getting it themselves by going to ChatGPT, and then, students, potentially weren't going to graduate because of the result. This was at Texas A&M. It's just a really, really, bad example of an academic, I think, misunderstanding the technology and responding poorly. And then the other one that they mentioned on that Hard Fork podcast, this is a New York Times article from May 27th. Here's what happens when your lawyer uses ChatGPT. And I do have a gift link for this one. I don't know if you heard about this one on the news too, Jason, but a lawyer who I think had been in practice for like 30 years
Yes.
went ahead and just verbatim put some ChatGPT created citations, and they turned out to be court cases that had never existed. This was a case of suing an airline, and it had to do with somebody who felt like the airline attendants had pushed the cart into their knee too hard. And anyway, the judge really went off on this lawyer. And, the lawyer, presenting completely fabricated legal cases, I think that should probably be really high. I hope they lose their law license. They claimed that they didn't realize that the AI could hallucinate and that it could do this. So again, an example of just someone really not understanding some of the basics of the technology that they were trying to use. And just, I think these are both pretty egregious examples, but I hadn't seen these earlier and thought they were worth mentioning.
Absolutely. So this is another, like, be careful sort of thing. I have two articles that I want to start off with. The first one is, this is from, and this one's actually not in the document. This is from NPR, and it was on Morning Edition. This was a couple weeks ago. It's a story by Kate Wells. Can ChatGPT help people with eating disorders as well as another human? And this particular story is about the National Eating Disorder Association, and they had decided that there was just too much business in their call line, and they talked about things like how it was taking sometimes hours, or people wouldn't be able to get a hold of a counselor, and so they decided that during a staff meeting a couple weeks ago, or this I guess would be back in March, quoting the article, the helpline staff formally notified NEDA about their unionization, and then 4 days after that, because they were being overworked and felt like that they weren't being treated appropriate as employees, and then at a routine virtual staff meeting, MTR obtained the audio of the call. They abruptly, the National Eating Disorder Association's board chair fired the helpline staff. We will, subject to the terms of our legal responsibilities, begin to wind down the helpline as currently operating. And so after more than 20 years, they decide they're going to use something called Tessa, an AI-assisted technology expected around June 1st. They were going to replace essentially human jobs with a chatbot. So I listened to the story separately. My wife heard about this story. We both said this is a terrible idea for a variety of reasons. Well, as it turns out, I'd like to refer you to, I think this was yesterday's Wall Street Journal, which notes that Tessa, the AI bot in question, was shut down because it started giving dieting tips to people that were facing eating disorder problems. And I don't have to really comment here about how extraordinarily terrible this is, but this is exactly the problem, right? Like if I don't think you would find either me or Wes argue that we should just ban the technology and pretend it doesn't exist. But for these people that are deciding that suddenly this is the way we're going to do this, right? Or this is the way we're going to conduct our business because this new technology is available, in most cases just doesn't understand what the technology does. And I've said this today. I worked with a group of administrators in the Great Falls Public Schools today. I've discussed this on some webinars I've done. I've discussed this with colleagues that you're treating it like a search engine, or you're treating it like the original AI bot in the
You're ignoring hallucination. You're ignoring that whole dynamic.
Eliza, which was the original chatbot of the 70s that was seen as a potential future counselor for people, had pre-programmed responses for a variety of situations. That's not what this is. It's coming up with the responses on its own, and you don't know what it's referring to. And some of these large language models have literally trillions of references of which you're getting an answer. And I would remind our listeners, we talked about this in February when Kevin Roos from the New York Times got access to the original chat implementation in the Bing search engine. He managed to get it to admit it was scared of being turned off, and then afterwards the chatbot started hitting on him and then told him he needed to leave his wife and run off with the chatbot. And that's what we're talking about here, right? And then while we're talking about hard fork, I don't know if you've listened to the latest edition of Hard Fork West. It's really good. But it introduced a new term to me I'd never heard before, and they were talking to, and I want to make sure that I get this right. Actually, this is last week's edition of the Hard Fork podcast. And they talked to, and I want to get the name right. Aja Korter, I think is her name. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. She's a senior research analyst at Open Philanthropy. And they talk about something I'd never heard of before, which is the P ranking, the P number, the P something, which is the it's the percentage likelihood expressed in a percentage that you think the world is going to end or is going to be significantly impacted by AI. And her number, and again, she is a thoughtful thought leader in this space. Her percentage is 30%.
Oh, wow.
And it depends on the amount of time you're talking about. The further you go out, the more likely or higher it goes. That's an expert in this field, right? So let's not diminish the impact of these tools, or more importantly, let's not ignore them because of their novelty.
I'm wishing right now that we had, not another hour because I'm really tired, but
me too.
Man, let's tackle the AI articles sooner because man, these things are just so important. And wasn't it just this last week we had that one sentence, or maybe did we cover it last week? I guess where like 380 something like people agreed on this one sentence that said, treat AI like nuclear weapons and pandemics that are existential. So there's that level, and I think I don't know if it was in Hard Fork or somewhere else. I was hearing people. I think it was on Hard Fork. They were saying, there's one thing to talk about these future potentially existential threats, but then there's the near term, kinds of uses and misuses. And so the ones that I just gave about the professor accusing his class and, that lawyer, and then this one with eating disorders, that fundamentally ignores the hallucination dynamic, which every single AI, large language model AI has at this point. And then it also ignores that whole story about Sydney and Kevin Roos, right? That's why Microsoft, cut it off and said you can only have these short number of interactions. I'll mention in my Geek of the Week, but I'm going to say this is just a shout out to myself. But right after we had all this happen with Sydney, and I was like, isn't Microsoft really rushing things to connect the web and all this stuff? Because it seems like that's something we would need to take slowly. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot of pressure and push on these companies to try. I mean, how often are you hearing the words AI when you turn around in advertisements and things like that now? It's all over the place. But that's why we need to be having these conversations, and we need to help people understand capabilities as well as limitations. And then we got to figure out what this is going to mean for us, come fall, because hey, the tools they're still going to be here. And guess what? They're even going to be better.
Yep, totally. Absolutely true. Well, let's see what else. We are near the top of the hour here. Let me take a quick look at my other list here of stuff from this week. This is a quick hit. TechCrunch on June 7th. Sam Altman says that OpenAI has still not begun training ChatGPT 5, which is not a real surprising that they're taking a slower route here. There was that petition earlier this year, not the one line one from last week, but one earlier this year where 900 tech experts, including folks like Steve Wozniak, said that we need a 6-month pause on AI research, and I think that's part of the concern, I think, is maybe working on they're keeping their work on ChatGPT 4, which is not universally available. You have to pay for it. That's a piece there. So I thought that was an interesting thing to know.
Which article was that?
This is the TechCrunch article. OpenAI still not training ChatGPT 5, says Sam.
Got it. Thank you so much.
And then I'll also point out an article. This is from Vox on June 3rd. It's a great article that talks about how everyone in the kind of information business is thinking about ways to label content made by AI. And as an example of this, there is a lot of there's a lot of concern about the extraordinary images that things like Midjourney can create. And let me be clear about this. I mean, I even demoed this today for folks I was talking to. It is a really stunning creation engine for images. But if you are using them, you should be labeling them, right? Not unlike the way we tend to label things in academia to give a source site. We should be saying it's AI. And so Google, for example, is thinking about ways that they can add metadata and then encourage producers to add metadata to images that are AI generated.
And of course, one of the issues is going to be all the existing images that we have out there. It's just going to be a crazy puzzle, man. I don't know how we're going to figure this out, because there's a lot of things that we are not sure about when it comes to AI, but there are some things we are pretty sure about, and we are pretty sure that this is going to make it so much easier for people to create so much more mis and disinformation. So other than saying let's have some more media literacy classes, and let's work on it, guys and gals, let's work on the tools. I don't know how that's going to play out.
Yep, I would agree totally. Okay, Wes. Well, do you have anything else you want to cover for this week?
You want to do that CNN business one about teachers on the front lines?
Yeah, I did think that article was really interesting. And look, I've already closed our link stock. So this was from recently, and the reason why I think this is so interesting is because, I mean, where was this article 10 years ago, right? Or 15 years ago, probably, with a better way of putting it. But CNN writes on June 3rd in the CNN's business section that teachers are on the front lines of a battle to change how teens use social media. And they start talking about things like, there is a teacher that they're talking to from an Arizona high school that shows the social dilemma, which we've talked about here on the podcast in the past. and the harms of social media. And then, of course, they're referring to now the Surgeon General's report that we reported about last week, regarding the warnings the Surgeon General is giving out about social media. And what is extraordinary to me in this circumstance is that I believe that the two guys that host this podcast have been saying this for a long time now. But this really needs to be part of our regular lessons in our classroom. And obviously, there's some places it fits in a little better than others, but I really do think that this is everyone's responsibility as educators. And they're talking about more people that are working on pledges and kind of baseline baseline pieces. They talk about an effort called Off and Away for the Day, which is an effort to teach students like appropriate lines. And I really like their rules poster here. Scarsdale High School in Arizona does Off and Away for the Day. And they say during free periods, it's okay to do meditation or to listen to music or to listen to podcasts, but checking social media, games or scrolling is not encouraged. Between classes, brief phone checks are fine, but getting on social media, playing games, scrolling is not what is acceptable there. And then during class time, phones are not just put away, but they're off unless the teacher directs otherwise. And I think that even as a tech-savvy teacher that believes that there can be an extraordinary educational use for cell phones in the classroom, I wholeheartedly endorse this effort.
It is so important that we help all of us, not just kids that are sitting at the desks or whatever, but all of us to navigate this whole blended world of having a screen and being able to, have that in front of us and when we're going to do that and when we're going to put it away. So yeah, I think this looks like a great article, and it's good to see this, hitting mainstream media. And I think that, with smartwatches and the ways in so many different devices, it's just, we have so many choices, and I think we just kind of we've assumed a lot with one-to-one. And I think this is probably one of the important things that we probably need to continue to do professional development on. And it's more than just put it away. What I have seen, unfortunately, more of than anything else is we'll just put that away. We're not getting that device out. And I don't think that is constructive in terms of media literacy. Yes, that can help you have students work on an assignment with paper and pencil, but helping students navigate the choices that they have and working on that. And let me just say, it's pretty challenging in middle school.
Yeah. And well, as for high schoolers, and frankly, it's challenging with college students. But I think using your instructional authority in a classroom is really important, right? And you can make that cooperative authority. I think you can involve students on the conversation, and I think it's likely that you're going to have more receptive students than you ever have before, because I do feel like the younger students are starting to turn a little more cynical about their devices in a healthy way. But you can do it together, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be using at least your half of that authority, right? You have to be the expert in the room.
And we have to make instruction interactive and worth being in the room for, and this is something that we continue to see a lot of is, using class time exclusively for content delivery. And I think that we really need to mix that up. And students need to be able to have devices out for a portion of the class. And, why did I show up today? Could I have watched a video or listened to a podcast and gotten everything out of it that the students who were in class got? If so, you've failed your students, I think, because when we're interactive and we're face to face, that should make a difference, in terms of the kinds of interactions that we have.
Yeah. Well, and if you can be replaced by an AI bot, by the way, then I think you're giving a lot of opportunity to make a lot of interesting change there. So.
There you go. Okay, so quick geeks of the week. You got one for us?
Yeah, just a really quick one to share. This is an AI tool, but it's starting to become the category I really like, which is a narrow-purposed AI tool. And this is something called Chat PDF, and essentially it allows you to upload a PDF to inform your own chatbot. So if you have, for example, you create a group of study notes for a test, or you have a document that you would like to be able to interact with in a question and answer format. It essentially creates a chatbot based on a specific document. And this is where I'm beginning to think really the most powerful pieces of this is the large language models can help word things and help you have more interaction with it. But in the end, if you can tell it what sources to use to inform its answers, that is a lot of power and magic.
Absolutely. And I've got two quick ones. Mark Rober was the keynote speaker at the MIT commencement, and MIT News on June 1st has an article, and it also features his YouTube video. If you don't know Mark Rober, you need to. He worked for NASA. He worked on one of the rovers for Mars, and he is one of the most influential science teachers in the world because of his YouTube channel and the videos that he's created. And so anyway, he challenged the graduates to throw themselves into the unknown, and it's an excellent 20 minutes, and I highly recommend that you check that out. And then the next one is a personal one. I had mentioned for weeks and weeks that I was going to be on this podcast at school, and lo and behold, it happened. So it is season 4, episode 7 of From the Horse's Mouth, the official podcast of Providence Day School in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it's called Demystifying AI. I was one of 4 panelists. It's just a 30-minute podcast. And in addition to several of us from school, our 2010 graduate Christian Gibson, who is a very high-ranking engineer and employee of OpenAI, was part of our conversation. And so would commend that to you. All right, Jason, where can folks find you when you're not here on Wednesday night?
Hey, best place to find me is probably still Twitter, Tech Savvy Teach.
And you can find me at wfryer on Twitter. You can go to wesfryer.com/after and get lots of links. But we want to thank everybody for joining. Thanks to Betsy and Peggy, who were live. I don't know if my dad was number 3. We still have 3 live viewers tonight, so that's always great. Thank you all for your participation. We want to encourage everybody to visit our website, edtechsr.com, where you can download small 32 kilobit MP3 audio versions as well as smaller compressed video versions. But you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can follow us on Twitter at EdTechSR. And we are going to be probably missing some shows because of some travel coming up here in the month of June, just to let you know. But we will post about that. Just generally, if we don't post like anything about the show, we're on because, usually we're here on Wednesday evenings, North American time. But like I said, we'll be missing a couple. We want to encourage everybody to stay savvy and stay safe, and have a great week out there. We will see you all next time on the EdTech Situation.
Good night.